If you're like me, you spend a lot of time browsing used gear marketplaces. And if you're very like me, you'll often sort them price lowest to highest, which means you've probably come across this lens. The Lumix 45-150. So the focal length of this lens goes from 45mm to 150mm, which gives you the equivalent frame of view as if you're going from 90 to 300 on a full frame setup. Our aperture starts at f4, but when you start to zoom in, that very quickly jumps to f5.6. But when you consider the price of this lens, well, you know, you wouldn't expect it to have a super fast aperture anyway. I paid €100 for this lens over a year ago in well-used condition on MPB. Nowadays, you can find them in pretty good condition, anywhere from €130 to €160 on MPB, but it's a very common lens. So you can expect to find it on places like eBay or Gumtree or adverts or Done Deal, anything like that. The lens is stabilized as well. It's the Mega optical image stabilization as opposed to the newer Power image stabilization, but it is still stabilized, which is what this noise is. That's the stabilization. Build quality wise, it's okay. The lens mount is metal, and the silver version does feel very metallic in the hand. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a hole here at the back of the lens. And when you quickly zoom in or out, you can actually feel air coming in and out of that hole. It's kind of very not weather sealed for me. Now, I have taken it to the beach and stuff like that, and there's no dust or sand in the lens, but if you're in an area with like a lot of fine particles, then this is just going to hoover them right up. So design wise, I mean, it's a very small lens considering the reach, and I know I say that in pretty much every Micro Four Thirds lens video, but it really is small considering the reach you get. On the silver version, and I'm pretty sure on some earlier versions of the black copy of this lens, we have the letters HD written on the front. So I'm imagining that back when this lens shipped, it came with a body that had just, you know, it was doing 1080p video, and they wanted to like emphasize that. So there is also a thread for a lens hood, but mine didn't come with it. I'm imagining that this was dropped by the previous owner, and the lens hood probably absorbed a good bit of the impact considering the little dings and marks at the front. I don't know if they're showing up on video. I do wish I hadn't gotten the silver copy in hindsight. It looks all right on a body that has like a silver top or a mainly silver body, so like the EM5 Mark II or my GX85 or my GX8, it looks okay. But when I stick it on a body that doesn't have any silver and it's just black, it kind of looks a bit weird. I used to shoot a lot of sports with this lens, and I'll get into that in a bit, but when I had it on my G9, it just kind of, it stood out in a weird way. The zoom ring feels nice in the hand, like there's no complaints there, and the focusing ring also feels completely fine. It doesn't have that kind of weighted feel that a lot of Olympus lenses have, but it, you know, it's fine. I don't manually focus much anyway. I will say design-wise, like it's fine, but this isn't like a particularly inspiring looking lens. And it's just a basic zoom lens. I get it's not meant to give you like, you know, vast inspiration. If I were to look at this on a shelf, it doesn't really make me want to go out and take photos, as opposed to some of my other lenses, mainly the Olympus 17mm f1.8. I really like the look of that lens. If I see that, I'm like, yeah, I want to go out and shoot with that. But then again, it's fine. I think if I went for the black version of this lens, I wouldn't feel that way as much. Image quality from this lens is really nice, especially when you consider it's not the fastest. You can actually get a decent amount of background blur just because of how focal length works. There is slight vignetting with this lens, but I only noticed it when pixel peeping for the review. I didn't notice it when printing, I've not noticed it when sharing images online, and I didn't even notice it when editing. It's literally just when I, you know, looked at an image of an empty sky and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, the corners are a bit darker. But if you're taking pictures of a subject and a background, you know, if your background has stuff in it, you're not going to notice this. Images from this are also nice and sharp. If you've got the megapixels to crop in, you're not going to end up with a soft image. I know on the Lumix 100-300, you did lose a bit of contrast and saturation when you were fully zoomed in. With this lens, it's not anything that I've noticed when taking photos or even when reviewing them. Honestly, it just performs really well, and that extends to the autofocus. The autofocus on this lens is nice and fast. This is on Olympus bodies and Panasonic bodies. We do have a manual focus ring that's not, it doesn't feel weighted or anything, but if you need to manually focus, it'll do the job. A few months ago, a music promoter friend of mine asked me to photograph a gig for him. The gig was Ronan O'Snowday and Miles O'Reilly. It was a very fantastic gig. I believe they're still touring together. If you get a chance to see them, you totally should. And this is the lens I took with me. I was debating taking this or my 100-300, and I thought the 100-300 would be overkill. Image-wise, it performed great, and for video, there was a bit of hunting, but I think that's more the G9 than this lens. It was the G9 Mark I was using to film, and That autofocus isn't great for video, really, and it's not great for low light video while you're moving and your subject's moving. You can't focus super close to your subject either. You can get about a meter away and then that's it, but considering the actual reach of this lens, that's not really an issue. So who's this lens for? It's kind of tough to give an actual response to this. If you want to get into sports photography or nature photography, well, you'll probably want the 100-300 or even the 100-400. But if you want a cheap everyday carry lens you can just stick in a bag and forget about, I think this is it. I've taken this lens with me all over Ireland. I've taken it to the UK, I've taken it to Germany, and I've taken it to Spain. And as a travel lens, provided you're somewhere that's dry, it's great because, I'll be honest, I have pairs of socks that when they're rolled up is bigger than this. It's a tiny lens, takes up no room, and you get a 90-300mm equivalent in a form factor that I'm pretty sure this is about the size of like the old Canon 18-55 kit zooms. When I go traveling with my camera, I usually just like to take hand luggage, which means that my backpack is holding all my camera gear, all my clothes, and having space for souvenirs. So for all I would love to take the Lumix 100-400 abroad with me, this just makes sense. Let's talk pros and cons. Pro number one is price. It's a super cheap lens. MPB has them for 130 to 160 euro at the minute, but if you wait for one to pop up that's in slightly worse condition, you can get them cheaper or you can find them in bundles. Pro number two is size. Like I said before, I have pairs of socks that I'm pretty sure are bigger than this. And it makes it great for travel photography, for street photography, or just to chuck in your bag as a just-in-case lens. Maybe you're a landscape photographer who just carries a tiny little sling bag and you normally shoot wide angle stuff. Sticking this in your camera bag, it takes up no space, and then you have a bit of zoom if needed. Pro number three is stabilization. I know it's the Mega OIS instead of the Power OIS, so it's not like the most modern stabilization, but it is still stabilized and it will work with dual image stabilization in some Panasonic bodies that support that. Let's talk cons. There honestly aren't that many. So there is that bit of vignetting, but like I mentioned, I had to really pixel peep to see that bit of vignetting. I don't think you're going to notice that in day-to-day use at all. Con number two, which is the last con, is that it's not weather sealed. And I wouldn't expect that in a lens at this price point. Panasonic, if you're listening, if you could weather seal this lens, give it the new stabilization and make it not silver, I would definitely buy one. Olympus have a version of this lens too. The only real difference is that it's not stabilized, whereas this is. But like, I'll use this on my EM5 Mark II, which won't use this stabilization. They'll use the IBIS on the camera and it still works fine. So, you know, if you can see the Olympus one cheaper, then you might as well just pick it up and get whichever. And if you really want that reach, there's the 100-300, there's the 100-400. You know, Olympus also have lenses that are pretty much those focal lengths as well. And then there's two other lenses that are kind of in a similar spot to this lens nearly. There's the 45-175 by Panasonic, and there's a 45-200 by Panasonic as well. If you're looking at this lens thinking the 300mm equivalent reach is enough for you, I'd be inclined to think again, because I thought that was the case. And I knew that if I was doing like dedicated wildlife or sports photography, I'd want something a bit longer. So I got the 100-300, and I actually saw a 100-400 at such a good bargain that I had to get that, and then I sold my 100-300. But if you do go for one of those options, just keep in mind they are quite a bit bigger and heavier. Like, if I want to go out and shoot birds properly, I'll take my G9 Mark II with my 100-400. But if I'm just going out for the day and want something with a little bit of reach, then I'll probably take my GX8 with this. Not every image needs to be taken with the best equipment. The best camera is the one that you have in your hand, and you know, your hand might get tired if you're carrying the 100-400 with you all day. So that's this week's video. Thank you for making it this far, if you made it this far. If you like the images I was showing off in the video, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Eli_Farnhill. I'll have my name on the screen as well. And if you like this video and want to see more of them, well then maybe consider subscribing. I upload new videos every Thursday at 3 p.m. Irish time on photography and the Micro Four Thirds system. So, slán.